I still see you. Good. You there? Can you see me?
Yep, I can see
All
you.
right, cool, cool. All right. Thank you. Welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody coming through. We have a special guest here today, beautiful Jennifer McPherson. Say your name right, right?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. And I'll let her introduce herself and what she does, and we'll get into conversations right after that. So take it away.
All right, thank you. My name is Jennifer A. McPherson. I am a licensed professional counselor and board certified counselor from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am the owner and founder of Mcpherson Consulting, Clinical and Consulting Services, LLC. In my practice, I provide telemental health, which is basically online counseling to people that need counseling, but they may be impacted by their schedule, family commitments, whatever it may be. I also provide clinical supervision to people that are license eligible within the state of Pennsylvania. I do consultations with other mental health professionals and medical professionals, and I also do online coaching. And I will be featured in the upcoming book Fiercely Speaking, which will be debuting later on this year.
Wow, that's a mouthful. That's a whole lot. So let's dig into that a little bit. So first, I wanted to how did you get into the line of work? How did you get into like how did you get into this? What drew you to mental health and those issues?
So my natural progression when I started off in undergrad, I actually started off as pre-med because I wanted to be a doctor.
Mm,
Um, where I came from North Philadelphia from a single parent family household. My
mm.
father died when I was a kid, so
Sorry to hear
I
that.
was always pressured to be a doctor. But once I actually got into college, it didn't really seem attainable to me because of the cost, the time commitment. My freshman year, I was working two jobs in addition to going to school.
Wow.
So I changed my major to psychology, and I immediately hated it, to be very honest with you. Um, I spent probably like the next like year and a half changing my major. I was BTMM at one point. I had religion. I whatever you thought of, I probably had that as a major.
Wow.
Um, I landed back in psychology. I decided to give it another chance, and I actually liked it as I kept going with it. When I got to like towards the end of my junior year, that's when I decided I wanted to go on to graduate school and be a therapist. So I did just that. I graduated from Temple University for undergrad, went to Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine for my first master's, and I've been working in the field ever since. And currently, I'm getting my second master's from executive MBA in healthcare because
Mm.
my goal is to one, make mental health more streamlined, reduce that stigma, but also work with bigger companies to help reduce that stigma, whether it be insurance companies, hospitals, and anything else like that.
That's interesting that you say that because I was talking to my mother about it, and I said, it's now it's becoming a more widespread phenomenon where it's like everywhere you turn, you somebody has a mental health issue.
Hmm.
And I was like, a couple of years ago, you didn't, whether they weren't talking about it or, whether it wasn't so apparent, but a couple of years ago, you didn't really hear about it. You didn't really hear about people saying, well, I have something, that's going on with me. Or, I mean, I know definitely in our community, I can say our community, how us, it's not something that is, talked about a lot. It's very, look, I guess I don't want to say look down upon. Maybe I guess like you could say look down upon,
Yeah.
but there's when you talk about wanting to seek help or wanting to talk to somebody, you're like, you crazy. You're not talking to anybody.
Hmm.
It's not very so. I know a lot of well-known artists are talking about it as well now. I know her Charlemagne the God. He's got like a book, things of that. So a lot of people are starting to bring that out more. How have you? Because I know your clinic is more community based. How have you seen it in the community? The issues in your
Well, just growing up in the community, I witnessed the same thing. Like, people of color, we are the first ones to deny that we have a mental health issue. We don't like talking about mental health. We don't even like knowing that mental health exists.
right, right, right,
Our culture has just been so ingrained in always having to be strong, fight back, not
right.
let anything knock you down. That when it comes to being vulnerable is almost a shameful thing in our culture.
Mhm.
And if you're being vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling anxious, I'm struggling in this area of my life, you're not being strong. It's like you're being looked
Right.
down on. Now that times are changing, we're not where we need to be yet. We're kind of getting there, and we have more people being vocal about mental health. We're learning that it's okay to not be okay,
All right,
and
right,
that
right.
there are people out there that can help you throughout that process to help you be okay with whatever issue that you might be struggling with. Um, while that is a great conversation, and we need to have more of those conversations and encourage people to go get help, one of the big things that's still preventing people from getting help is either lack of access to help, depending on where they live, and also insurance issues, and also cost issues as well too.
All
So those
right,
are some of the other things that, as we keep having these conversations, promoting mental health and encouraging people to seek help, how can we actually get them to get help?
all right. That's interesting. Like you said about how community and how it's looked down upon. Um, I was talking to, like I said, I talk to my mom a lot about certain issues because she's a teacher,
Hmm.
so she sees it all the time in the young. And I want to know what you think about this to an extent where until we can come to that realization of people getting help easier, talking about it more, what do you think of? I don't know. I guess it's harder to do at a younger age, but because she's from the Caribbean, so she would tell me how when certain people have certain issues, they would let it be known to the, I guess, known to the community. So let's say you're a doctor, you would have the responsibilities to say, hey, well, this person has a mental health issue. If you're going to be with her and procreate, know that this might happen to your children, so that at least it's known. Like, listen, if you're going to go through this, you know that this might happen to your children, and then they have an option to, well, have children or not. Since it's in our community, that's not something that's done. Do you feel that that's something that should be done until we get to that point where, we're helping people, we're getting it, you're getting them the treatment that they need, so that it's not a thing where it's so widespread? Because I feel like it's a lot more widespread than is known to us right now, and that's hurt. That, I mean, that hurts. It hurts people finding to get education, to live their everyday life, especially if they're not getting help about it, especially if they're not talking about it, especially if there's not any kind of path to, uh, I guess, being cured, quote unquote, if there's even a cure. But how do you feel about like something like that? Like letting it be known, and for procreation and stuff like that.
So it's not necessarily the procreation part. I think that is the biggest thing. It's more so the education part, because we educate people on physical health. Like, hey, if you have a history of diabetes in your family, your children will probably be likely to have diabetes when
All
they
right.
get older as well too. If you are likely to have depression run in your family, it can be hit or miss depending on numerous things. So, while I don't really want to discourage people from having children just because there's a history of X, Y, and Z in their family, there are ways to educate people about X, Y, and Z, whether it be depression, alcoholism, schizophrenia, anxiety, so that if you're more knowledgeable about your background and what may be going on, how can you work from a preventative matter from possibly having that happen to someone else in your family or from your children? There's something in the behavioral health field called the stress diathesis model. And
Mm.
this model basically believes that you are predisposed to certain genetic conditions, including mental health conditions, but they may or may not come out depending on whether or not those genes are triggered. Some of those genes can be triggered by chemicals, for instance. Some of those genes can be triggered by stress and trauma.
Mm.
So if we know that about ourselves, like let's say, okay, um, my spouse, his father was an alcoholic. If I'm going to go have children with him and we know, okay, there's a history of family alcoholism, what can we do so that maybe our children don't go down our same path, or maybe so that he doesn't go down this same path? It could be,
Right.
okay, maybe I avoid alcohol. Maybe I learn how to cope with my feelings in a more adaptive manner.
Mm.
Maybe I learn to not depend on the bottle to help with my feelings. Maybe I go to therapy for myself and talk about the things that impacted me based off of this person's behavior.
Right.
So there's numerous things that can be done, but it's just more the education standpoint, because we always educate people about the physical health, but
Mm.
we don't necessarily educate people on emotional health and mental health and what they
Right.
can do for preventative matters for that, and how to actually get treatment and what treatment can do for you. Because you
Right.
notice if you ever go into counseling and you're asking people, hey, have you any background in mental health? Have you heard of CBT, DBT, IFS, Brene Brown and her studies? People don't necessarily know about things until your therapist is the one educating you and helping you throughout that process. When really we can probably start working on these things when people are a lot younger,
Right.
make it part of class, make it part of school, make it part of community education, and
Right.
really build up communities that way so that we're more knowledgeable about how these things really impact people.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, I agree. Education is definitely the key to a lot of things, and we could prevent a lot of things through education. That's why it's very heartwarming to hear that you're doing it for your community. What made you want to do like come into the communities and just like this is what I got to do for these people.
So I grew up in North Philadelphia. Anyone that knows North Philadelphia, you'll basically understand. Um, North Philadelphia basically made me, shaped me. I still have family in North Philadelphia. I still see people in North Philadelphia. I treat people in North Philadelphia, and it's part of my background. I can't deny it. My family is also from the Caribbean. They came here in the 70s. I was born and raised here, so this is basically my community. And growing up, seeing people struggle with numerous things and never talking about it
Right. Right.
and never getting the opportunity to heal and grow. That's heartbreaking, especially if this person is your neighbor, someone you see every day, an uncle, a cousin, whomever it may be. So just being able to give back to the community that I grew up in, the community that, for better or for worse, shaped me to be who I am.
Right.
That's the biggest thing because we can focus on many different communities. Depends on what you want to focus on. But the community that I'm from in North Philadelphia doesn't necessarily get all of that attention or the attention and respect that they deserve.
True. Definitely. That's another reason I've done the same thing with martial arts. I've been in Brooklyn for ever, and I just had to give back to kids because I see, and this could leads into the next question for you. As I'm seeing the young grow, I'm seeing how since there's not a lot of fathers in the household, and I see a lot of these kids they lack discipline, they lack any kind of purpose. They just kind of want to do what they want to do. They lack accountability. I feel like with martial arts and bringing that to the community for the young, I feel like I could help mold them to being those types of people that they should be when they get older.
Mhm.
You see in your community, since you've been in North Philadelphia for as long as you have, how have you seen the young from your generation to this new generation?
So even my generation, like I look back to the people that I went to school with, and they're struggling with the same things that this generation is struggling with.
Mm,
It's
interesting.
it's the generational curse that just keeps on happening and happening and happening. It's basically repeating the mistakes of your elders.
Mm,
In the 80s, that was the generation of people that were addicted to crack, and then they
all right,
switched
all right.
to people that were living in the 90s, and then our age group, they have all of this trauma from absentee parents and people
Mm-hmm,
that were
mm-hmm.
addicted to drugs, and now they're at the age where they're having children. Their children are acting up, and they're also seeing these messages in the media and TV that's also contributing to what they're going through.
All right.
So as we keep repeating these things, generation to generation, when are we going to break the cycle? Who is
Mm-hmm.
going to be the one to break it?
All right.
Because if you never break that cycle within your own family, you're basically going to have someone else come after you and keep making those things.
All right.
So it really comes down again to education and letting children know that even though you may see your mother, your father, your uncle doing these type of things, do you necessarily have to do that? Do you want better for yourself? Because growing up, especially being from the hood, we never learned that we can do better or we have the ability to do better because
All right.
sometimes we don't have people around us that are doing the better that we're talking about right now. If
Right.
you don't
Right.
have that positive example, how can you learn to do that? And even for myself growing up, I didn't have anyone in my life that, had a master's degree, was a professional that, started their own business, that, did different interviews, wrote books, was a scholar, or did anything like that.
Right.
It took me a long time to really figure out, okay, I don't necessarily have to be like my parents. I can be more. And even when you're trying to figure out how to be more and you're going through those struggles of paying for college, surviving out in the world and making money and doing all of those things, as you start getting that success, it gets lonely because you are sometimes the only person that has that type of success.
Right, right.
And at some point, it's not even the fear of failure that starts to really creep into your mind. It's sometimes the fear of success
Mm,
because you don't really see many people like you that have succeeded. So it's like, if I do succeed and, get out of North Philly, don't have to live on poverty, don't have to worry about food stamps and WIC and all of those things, and I'm living this life that I've always dreamed of, sometimes that's scarier than failure. So
mm.
it's really giving these kids support, giving their parents support too, so they can probably break their own generational curses. And it really gets back to the education. We don't have to live in the mindset that we have been trained to live in
Mm-hmm.
and just keep following in these bad behaviors.
That's interesting. That's pretty powerful that you said that with people, the fear of success. Because I mean, I guess it to an extent that also does make sense. If you're going higher up in, let's say, the economic food chain, your peers that you grew up with are getting left behind. So now
Mm-hmm.
who do you have to like who can you look to that are with you are going to be people that are not in your or not you're really your peers in the sense of people that you grew up with. Is going to be Billy. We didn't grow up with Billy. We grew up
Mm-hmm.
with Shamel or something like that. That's who we grew
Yeah.
up with. So when we grow up, we're gonna see them like, wow. So it does put you in an uncomfortable situation. And then not only that, I mean, like you said, you were raised in the hood. I'm raised in the hood. So when you get to those certain levels, you know what comes with it from people that you leave behind. They feel like that they think that you think that you're better than them. But it's just I'm just trying to do better for myself. I'm not trying to stay in the same place, and then that also builds a divide. So it's kind of like you're in between two places that make you feel uncomfortable. So that is an interesting thing, and a lot of people either you have to grow up and not care, or you have to it's some you're gonna make a decision that someone is not gonna like. He's not
Yeah.
gonna make someone happy. So how have you dealt with that? Because I mean, that seemed like something personal when you said that.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, that sounds like something personal. So.
Yeah. I have tried to bring as many people as I can with me along for the ride, but I've realized that people have to be as hungry as I am or even hungrier.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you're not as hungry as I am, I can't do much to change that. I can always, have you look at my example. I can try to motivate you all day and night. I could try to
Okay.
promote you all day and night, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
be hungry to do the work. And
Right.
unfortunately, yeah, you are going to leave, in essence, behind. It's not to say to forget where you're from
Right.
or forget your background, but as you go up and do more work and elevate, your circle is going to start to change whether you like it or not, because you're going to naturally be attracted to people of the same mindset that are probably doing similar work to you or work that is on the same level. So your
Right.
circles are changing. But what I have found is, don't forget where you are, because that's what keeps you humble.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't necessarily have to stay in that same place, because that place has the opportunity to drag you down. But what I like to do is I like to give back. That's how I give back to the community I'm from, because not everyone around me is as hungry as I am and wants to elevate. But what can I do to help them along the process, whether it be refer to mental health services,
Mm-hmm.
let them know what is out there, let them know, how can they provide education to their children, their grandchildren. Because, to be honest, if I had stayed in the life that I was probably predestined for lack of a better word, I
Right.
probably wouldn't be here today, to be very
Yeah.
quite honest with you. So the only way to go for me, what I see, is up. And if you keep going up, that's where your success comes. But don't forget where you're from.
All right. Definitely. So I know you unpacked a lot of stuff of what your clinic does. So for my grandmama that doesn't know about all of that stuff, how would you unpack that for my grandma? Like, what is it that you do for like kids on a day-to-day basis with the clinic, and you know, unpack that in a more non-medical term, in
So
non-medical terms.
I actually have a lot of grandmamas. I love the grandmamas I have. So basically, what we start off with is basically, what is going on in your life right now? Give me a good picture of what life looks like for you.
Okay.
What is bothering you about life right now? And how would you want this to change? Sometimes the how is attainable and sometimes unattainable. Sometimes there's other ways that we can help facilitate that change.
All right.
And we start focusing on that relationship, building that trust, because in the communities that we work with, there is a big mistrust with medical and mental health professionals. So we build that trust and we work on ways that we can help them, develop that change so they can get the results that they want and the results that they need as well too. And that can look very different for everyone. If it's someone that's struggling with depression, it could be, hey, maybe we're going to do some CBT or some other types of modalities. If it's something with anxiety, how can we help you reduce your anxiety? If you're dealing with an issue that might require medication, how do we get you connected to psychiatry or psychiatric nurse practitioners that can prescribe medications for you?
Okay.
So I'd never like to give the blanket statement like, hey, this is what we do, because I believe in patient centered care,
Mm.
meaning that, if I'm treating Jason, Jason's plan is going to look like this.
All right.
If
All right.
I'm treating Sean, Sean's plan is going to look like this. No two people are alike because
All
no
right.
people's journeys or issues are the same. They
Exactly.
could be very similar, but we try to individualize that as much as possible, and we keep them open about what we're doing along the ride, because that's part of the education as well too. So it's not
Mm.
like you're coming into my office or doing a video session with me and you have no idea what we're doing for today and you can't even explain it so that you can develop the insight and education that you need.
All
No,
right.
you're going to be an active participant in your healing,
All
and you
right.
collaborate with your therapist so that you can understand what's going on to help elicit that growth and that change.
Well, that makes sense because it's like what's that saying? What is it? Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Right? If
Mm-hmm.
you're active in the learning, then you're going to be able to leave that situation and do it for yourself. But if you
Yep.
keep, if I keep being dependent on you, I'm never going to leave that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that it does make sense to keep them active in the learning, keep them researching. Like, all right, this is your homework for tonight. You have to make sure this and this. So, more of your clients are older or younger or
So for my practice, I have mostly adults.
okay,
Youngest that I will treat, for my telehealth practice is 18 years old,
okay,
and I go as high as long as someone is able to actively engage and have the desire to pay attention, because there's different stages of life where people may need help and they may need to elicit that growth. Sometimes it's not even growth. Sometimes it's really just settling. Okay, I'm towards the end of my life, and this is the issue that's coming up for me. How do I get comfortable with what's going on so that as I move from life and on to death, I feel comfortable with making that transition as well too.
wow, that's a deep one right there. Ugh, I don't want to think about that yet. I don't want to think about that. I mean, I think I'm pretty content with my life. So I don't. I hope I never get to a point where I don't feel like that.
And
But
we even have people that come into therapy that are typically content with life for lack of a better word.
mm,
But it's more so, how do I maintain self care? That's another big thing, because we have such a very, busy lifestyle in the United States. We always promote work, work, work.
yeah,
Never take a break, never take a vacation, and then you're working, and then you also have families, you might have school, you might have a
hmm
second job, you might have other things that are going on. Life is generally good, but you're on the road to burnout and you want to figure out how to promote self-care. We have people coming into treatment for that so that they can just live, you know, a better lifestyle
all
from a
right.
holistic standpoint as well too. So there's always this misconception that therapy is only for people that have mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and all of these things. No, there are people that come to counseling, just to better themselves as well
hmm
too.
Well, just thought just comes to my mind. I know a lot of uh, people that go seek mental health or any kind of mental health training or to try to get better. They usually get hooked on pills. I noticed that was a big thing, especially a couple of years ago. But I think now people are starting to get to that point, like maybe we don't need to jump on the pills. At what point do you feel that they need to get on some kind of a medication to help their situation? Like, what do you feel?
Um,
Is it more of like an internal thing, or is a checklist of certain things? How does that?
So whenever we are screening for that, I usually recommend that people go through an assessment process. One, to check the severity, frequency, intensity, and pervasiveness of their symptoms.
Okay.
I also get a history of the person, and then once we get a better feel of what their issue is, we determine whether or not they would be a good candidate for medication.
Okay.
We also have to take into consideration, medical issues that could impact someone's medication. For instance, if someone has poor kidney function or other things going on, sometimes we don't recommend certain medications because we don't want their kidney function to go down the drain.
Right. Right.
And on top of having, a mental health issue, they're going to have a physical issue because now they're sick.
Right.
So that's something else we look into as well too. And we are a culture that has gotten very into, take a pill for this, take a
Right.
pill for
Right.
that.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't necessarily need a pill. Sometimes we do need pills. Sometimes we need pills short term. Sometimes we need pills long term. It
Right.
depends on that assessment and depends on the individual person. Some people are very opposed from medication. They're like, no, I'd rather do this holistically and work through my issues, through therapy and doing, different interventions.
Mhm.
Sometimes that does work if you're really, focused and determined to make that change. Some people, if there's more of a chemical imbalance, there's what you're the type of person, no matter what you do or no matter how much you change your lifestyle or your home life, that depression, anxiety, or whatever else may still be lingering there. You might be someone that might need medication. That being said, there are medications out there that are habit forming, meaning that you can get addicted to them, like benzodiazepines.
Mm.
Benzodiazepines are the Xanax, the Klonopins, those type of medications, because you're more likely to get addicted to them. And then if you try to get off them after being on them for quite some time, you're going to experience withdrawal symptoms.
Mhm.
So in my personal preference, I do not recommend those type of medications because they have the potential to cause more harm than good.
Right.
I recommend those medications in extreme situations, but even if you are going to get on those medications, I still say no, you would benefit from counseling. Because knock on wood, God forbid, you can't get your medication tomorrow because your doctor no longer wants to prescribe, you lose your insurance,
Insurance. Right.
um, you lost your medication and the pharmacy says they're not going to prescribe you another script until 30 days or whatever that may be. What are you going to do?
Right. Right.
You're
Right. Right.
just going to be stuck in this cycle. At least counseling can give you the skills to kind of cope and do better. God forbid you don't have the opportunity to get medication, because even though things have changed healthcare wise in our country, there are still people out there that don't have access to care, access to medication like some of us
Mhm.
do. We have
Right.
to take that in consideration as well.
Right. Speaking of the healthcare system, how do you feel about the current healthcare system out here, and how does it affect your practice?
So my personal practice, I honestly do not take insurance.
Oh wow. Okay. Makes
um,
sense.
yeah, healthcare has gotten a little bit better. I will say that. It's creating more opportunity and more access, but again, it's still not accessible like everyone else around the world. Whereas in some countries, it's universal healthcare. Healthcare is paid for by the government. You are entitled to healthcare in some other countries.
Right.
Whereas in America, healthcare is treated more as a privilege, even though we have made some steps for progression. Also, healthcare is very expensive in the United States. So some
Yeah.
people have barriers with that. Yeah, you may have insurance, but can you afford your copay, your deductible, which
Mhm.
most people don't know about? Can you even afford transportation to get to your doctor in
Mhm.
some cases? And then also on the back end, as counselors and even medical professionals have this issue too. When we're dealing with insurance, we have a whole slew of issues when it comes to dealing with insurance.
Mhm.
Let's say that, we have a client that comes in, they may be having an issue, but let's say that, they don't necessarily meet clinical criteria for a mental health diagnosis. Insurance companies will pressure you to give a mental health diagnosis so that you can continue treating that person. Then
Mhm.
you're kind of like in the dilemma. Okay, well, this person is coming in because they want to grow as an individual, but they're not necessarily meeting the clinical criteria for major depressive disorder. So it's like kind of what do I do then in an ethical sense? Then we have some people. It's like, okay, well, for instance, I have Keystone HMO. I want to use you as a therapist. Well, I don't take Keystone HMO. I take
Right.
PPO, or I take
Right.
all these other plans. So then you have to find someone that will take your specific plan. And it's like, okay, well, I have this $50 copay, that sets for specialists. Well, that $50 copay is going to apply to you coming to see a therapist every week or every other week. The
Right,
person
whatever
may
the
not necessarily be able to afford
right,
$50
right,
every single week or every other week. So I think there, just because of the cost and the legality issues and ethical issues on the back end and the front end, healthcare, it's there to supposedly help people,
mm-hmm.
healthcare is a great thing, but we could be doing so much more when we look at our counterparts, across the pond in other countries or in
Right,
Canada, to better serve people. And once you create that access, and it's like, hey, I actually can go and see a therapist, I actually can go see my primary care doctor, my psychiatrist, or whomever may be. That's how people get healthier. But because of that barrier, we're still seeing communities that are still sick just because they can't come in to see us.
right. That's interesting. I was looking at the healthcare problems as well. I watched sometimes the Joe Rogan podcast, and he had on what's the guy's name? The I forget his name now. But anyway, he's a professor out there in Canada, and he does clinical psychology as well. But he was actually saying that the it sounds good. The healthcare system in Canada sounds good, like on paper.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that when it's actually in practice, they have to go through a lot of hoops to get certain things going, like mental health care and seeing therapists and stuff like that. That they have it in place, but it's just so much hoops that you have to go through before everything like, kind of goes through. So he was saying that it's not as good as people may make it out to seem, but I mean, even if they have their problems, at least there's healthcare for all.
Yes.
I mean, you
Yeah.
gotta give them
And
that.
no healthcare system is perfect. At least I haven't found one that's perfect yet.
Right,
Um, but as the top earning country in the world, we're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, and we're
right,
still
right,
failing our people with getting access to care. That's a lot, and care is very expensive,
right,
because it's not like, well, now there is, they just passed a new law that hospitals have to post their prices on their website,
mm,
but that still doesn't tell you, hey, if I have to go into the hospital for, you know, a depressive episode, or because I'm feeling suicidal, how much is that going to cost me? Sometimes the cost
right,
of healthcare deters people from getting help from the jump as well too,
mm-hmm,
because we know
mm-hmm,
it's so expensive.
right. And there's do you have any kind of emergency services in your clinic, or where would people need to go for emergency services? I guess, like you said, I'm feeling suicidal. I know they like to have people call these hotlines, but I mean, wouldn't it be better if they could go into someone, see someone,
Mm.
feel their emotion? I don't know. I feel like it's always better in certain situations to be
Yes.
with someone live, like
So
right in
those
person.
hotlines, like you see the suicide hotline or the Warm hotline, like those national 24/7 hotlines, those are kind of like the first step for people that, might be having thoughts and aren't quite sure what to do, or
Okay.
people that might be disconnected from care. In every county, at least for Pennsylvania, I can't speak for another state, I'm only licensed in Pennsylvania,
Mm,
we have crisis services, and there's an outline about what to do in each specific county, like who to call, where to go. So for
mm,
instance, in Philadelphia, if you are having a mental health emergency, you can voluntarily commit yourself to a hospital to get the help that you need. And you can go to what we call a CRC. It's a crisis response center. We have a few of them throughout the city of Philadelphia.
mm,
There's Hall Mercer, which is down in Center City. We have Einstein. They're all over. You go in, you can get assessed by a mental health professional, and they can determine what's going on with you, the type of care that you need. And if it is something that is deemed as an emergency or a crisis, you can be transported to a hospital and get the treatment that you need. Now, if we have someone that is resistant towards voluntarily doing that, like I say, I have someone that is suicidal and they're not in agreement to go to the hospital,
mm.
I then can enact, involuntary commitment. And different states have different code names for it. Here in Pennsylvania, we call it 302.
Okay.
So what we would do is, we can call, our mental health delegate. We can refer the people into a mobile crisis. They will take them to mobile crisis. They will get assessed at the same CRC, and then it can be determined, hey, this person needs to go inpatient. This person needs to go, X, Y, and Z. And usually in those cases, we have what we call mental health court, where they appear in front of a judge, and the judge makes a determination, hey, that you came into mental health crisis because of this situation. You know, are we going to do this going forward with the 302, continue to have more care, or are you okay to go home and you're deemed appropriate maybe for aftercare services? So
Mm.
there are emergency services set up in place. It varies from state to state.
That's interesting. So pretty much you need to check in your state to see how those guidelines would go. But for
Mhm.
someone to get into involuntary situation, a second party would have to be there and say, "Hey, I think this needs to be done," and then someone will come over and I guess handle it from then that's when the process would go.
Yeah, for involuntary. Let's say that, you don't have a therapist that is doing this situation. Let's say it's a family member. They're like, hey, Johnny is suicidal. What do we do?
Right.
That person can call for help and say, hey, this is what's going on.
All right.
I need someone to come over and help out with this situation.
All right. All right. That's interesting. That's good. Some of these things people don't even know about. I've even heard
Mhm.
of that before. Because the first thing someone would do is call 911 or something, or just call the cops or
Yeah.
whatever. And then yeah,
And that varies place to place as well too. There are some places where 911 will come out and help with that involuntary or voluntary commitment process.
mm-hmm.
There are some places where the cops won't even come out and deal with that.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Wow. All right. So now I wanted to jump to the family. We talked briefly about fathers not being in the household, family dynamics. How often do you see that being an issue for the young or anyone in a family to have some kind of mental health issue? In
Um
your experience.
in my experience, it varies. It's both ends. You can have a mental health issue if both parents are present.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a mental health issue if there's one parent present. You can have a mental health issue if there's no parents present.
Right.
Um, Sometimes it's really down to the quality of someone's upbringing, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to think of it that way. For instance, you may have grown up, let's say, with a single mother like I did. um, Depending on the quality of that household, you may grow up to be a very strong individual based on, how you were raised, the support that you had. It's not to say that you may not ever miss not having a father or have some stuff around that, but it doesn't necessarily equal out to mental illness.
Right. Right.
You may grow up, in an adopted family and have a good experience that way, and doesn't necessarily mean, mental illness. It really just depends on the quality of someone's upbringing, the environment. Is there trauma involved? Is there poverty involved? Are there all these other factors that go into it? So it's so different when you think about it, because it really is down to that individual situation.
Right.
Now we know that some people are more prone to having mental health issues based off the environments that they're from,
Okay.
but it's not an end all be all.
Right. 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 So when you say that, when you say you know that there's certain things that lead to, or that you've seen a more percentage in certain situations, what situations are we talking about?
So when we think of that, the biggest thing that kind of comes up is trauma. When we think of trauma, we always think that trauma is this big event like, soldiers going off to war,
Okay.
sexual assault,
Right.
catastrophes, or things like that. Trauma can also happen on smaller scales. Growing up in the hood and not having access to food, not having access to healthcare, some people do consider that a trauma, because you're not having the basic necessities to
Yes.
live your
Right.
life.
It's okay. Mm-hmm.
So let's say, let me give an example. Let's say you grew up in a one parent household. That one parent was on drugs and was absent and not the best parent that they could be. That could be considered a trauma. Let's say that you grew up in a two-parent household, but your parents weren't very attentive to you, and let's say that at a young age you may have experienced some sexual abuse or some sort of physical abuse. That could be considered a trauma. So households vary. We need more of identification on what is trauma. There are
Mm-hmm.
people that are specialized and trained in trauma, but trauma is another thing that is connected to mental health. Is something that we don't talk about, because there are a lot of traumas out there that we don't necessarily think of or talk about. And before we got on, we talked a little bit about this Me Too movement and women, like, using their stories and talking more about it. Trauma is one of those things that we need to talk about more, because until you get into a place where you're comfortable with talking about it, processing it, and learning to grow from it, trauma is something that's going to continue to be pervasive in your life and continue to affect you. And
Hmm.
also, talking about traumatic stories can also be, when you're ready, of course, can also be fulfilling and also help someone else that may have gone through a similar trauma. And that's also, why I decided to do the book that I had mentioned, because
Right.
my own story of trauma, I hope that will inspire someone else that has gone through a similar trauma, so that they can grow and make the steps to, develop and move forward from that as well too.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I know we were talking about it before we started recording that people have to tell their stories, their journeys, what happened to them for other people to learn from it and to, hey, well, that's me. This is how she got out of it. Maybe I can do something similar. If people keep hiding, or I guess not hiding, because everybody is ready to speak when they're ready to speak. How
Mm-hmm.
you can't tell someone that their trauma, they need to do something about it, or they need to talk about it out and open. You're ready when you're ready, but they're doing such a huge service. I think a lot of people need to hear that what they're doing does such a great service to so many people, that hopefully it will encourage more people to come out, because like you said about the Me Too movement, um, and what some of these women are doing, they're coming out, but they're coming out 20, 30 years later, when now they can't get justice for what happened. Not only can they not get justice for what happened, but how many years they had that they could have been helping someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's so big, and it's not a, I'm not bashing anyone. It's just, the reality of the situation is just like, you know, um, how, like, for instance, this, statute of limitation, it's gone. So you can't expect to have justice done to someone that did something to you if you come in 20 years after the fact. And it's interesting that you also come up with that, because I was when I was thinking about the Me Too movement, I feel like it's kind of like a lynch mob mentality, in the sense that so right now it's in the top of the ladder, right? Let's just say, let's use this as an analogy. Right now, women that are coming out, majority of the ones that you're seeing on the news and things of that nature are on the top of the ladder. The Harvey Weinsteins, the people like that have, the
Mm-hmm.
Bill Cosby's, that have a lot of money. Now they're coming again. A lot of these people are not getting found by a jury to be guilty of these acts. It's just people coming out saying that they did something.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm scared to see is that now when it comes down to, let's say, the hood, or people that don't have the finances for legal counsel and representation, if you're just getting accused of something, and this accusing mentality is, now that you were accused, you're guilty. I don't see why people don't see how this is I get a bad something that we shouldn't, a route that we got to be tread lightly on, because a lot of people are going to go down for something that they didn't do, if it's just he said, she said. And I'm feeling a little bit. I don't know how you feel, or how you have seen it out, in your communities, or when you talk with your people. But how do you, like, how do you see it?
So we can't always rely on he said, she said, because neither you or I were in the room or there when it happened.
Right.
You may not ever know the truth, but I also don't believe that victims should be silenced.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we get in the habit of silencing victims, attacking victims, harassing victims, that is where we fail as a community and as a culture, because it's already hard enough coming forward directly after an assault
All right.
and having to call 911, make a police report, possibly having testing or rape kits done, and then have
Mm-hmm.
to go throughout the legal process right after. And that's why was part of the reason why some people have decided to come forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, because of that fear and also that trauma. They're not ready to put their story out. We can't force anybody to put their story out. And once you get to that point where you feel like you may be ready to put that story out, that is your decision. I don't ever recommend silencing victims. Like, for instance, I'm sure everyone has seen the R. Kelly documentary that
All
came
right.
out
All right.
a few weeks ago on Lifetime. In situations like that, it's like, well, why didn't they say something, when this first happen, or why didn't the people around him say something or report him or anything like that? None of us were there. None of us were on that tour bus, in that studio, in that
Mm-hmm.
house. We cannot say what did and what did not happen because we were not there.
Mm-hmm.
That does not give us the right to degrade these women and downplay their stories. Once they get to the point where they feel empowered and encouraged to finally come forward, we can leave that up to a court of law to determine, hey, did this happen? Did this not happen? Did something happen? What is
Right.
the evidence? And let them deal with that. I am not a lawyer. That is not my
Right. Yeah.
expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when dealing with victims that have gone through that type of pain, and the pain that can result even just from coming forward, you know, we owe it to women to be able to move forward and heal from their pain and not be silent.
Right. Right. Right.
Whether you're in the hood or you're a $50 million earning actress or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be, every woman deserves that. Because if not, again, back to those generational curses, it's going to keep
Keep
happening.
happening. Right. Um. Now that you bring up the R. Kelly thing, not only that, I think, a lot of the issue is with the parents as well, because what were they instilling in their children to let them go along with him, or let them go along with that? A lot of the issues that I was hearing, especially with some of the parents, is, well, I let her go with him because I thought it was her big break, or some kind of money thing, they were trying to give them the opportunity. But I mean, I'm a parent myself. I'm not letting my daughter go with nobody
Mm-hmm.
unless I'm there. I'm. It's just like the same when you tell your kids, well, don't go with that man if they offer you candy or something, or when you come out from school, don't go. It's the same thing. So I think not only do we need to let these people speak on what's happened to them, but we also who's their circle? What circle are they around that are letting them get into these kind of situations?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I don't know. Like I said, personally, I mean, as much as I want to, say that, my daughter would have never fell into something like that. I know that I'm thinking every day, and I'm trying to find, I'm researching and trying to find new ways to educate her to make sure that she doesn't get caught in no trap. So I mean, how do we educate our parents? I guess you could say, or the people that are older than us, or the people that are having kids, to make sure that this don't stuff the kind of thing doesn't happen. Because I mean, and then at what point? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
No,
that.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I was gonna say, at what point do not only that, what point is it the women saying, well, maybe I could have done something differently as well? Because I always I'll bring back my daughter as well. I say I always think everything is my fault. Because if I don't, then I'm not learning something, right? I have to take responsibility for everything that I do. So, I mean, of course, like for instance, if it's a domestic assault, I can't say that it's my fault that I got smacked, right? But what could I have done differently to put myself in a better situation?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that, with something like the Me Too movement as well, I'm not hearing where the people are also saying, well, damn, I could have done something different. I feel everybody's throwing blame, but nobody's trying to say, well, damn, this could be done, or I could be doing this, or like for instance, I was listening to Terry Cruz's interview when he was talking to, I think it was Congress or something like that, and he
Mm-hmm.
said that I think it was Harvey Weinstein that he grabbed him in his man parts. I said, but how, if somebody was to grab me in my man, I would knock him out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have that responsibility to protect yourself. Even if you want to get a job, get another job.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna force me to put myself in a position that I don't want to be in just for money.
So when it comes to victimization, one common thing that kind of comes up in mindset is coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Hmm.
I could have fought him off. I could have smacked him back. I could have quit my job. I should have done this. If it were to happen again, I would do this.
Hmm.
If you keep living with that mentality, that coulda, woulda, shoulda, you're gonna coulda, woulda, shoulda all over yourself. Because once you are in that moment, you are in that fight or flight moment.
Mhm.
I don't care who you are. You can't say what you were going to do. You may have the mentality, okay, if somebody gonna do to me, I'm gonna smack the hell out of them. You may be saying that now, but sometimes, you are overcome with the fear, the trauma, being overpowered by someone, because that's what predators do. They rely on that power.
Mhm.
You know, you can coulda, woulda, shoulda all over the place. How you react in the moment is how you react in the moment.
Mhm.
Whether it's, maybe I'm going to be assaulted so that they don't kill me. Maybe I am going to fight back, whatever it may be. If we get caught up in that coulda, woulda, shoulda, again, we're not doing justice for anybody. It's like, well, Terry Crews, you used to be a football player. You could have knocked the hell out of him. He didn't. It's still his story, though. It still
Right.
doesn't dumb down the situation that this did happen to him. The thing was, whoever did grab him, I don't know if it was Weinstein or not, should have
Right.
never put hands on him. That's the thing.
Right.
You need to teach people that it's not okay to assault other people, to abuse other people, to overpower them just because you can. That's where it really needs to start, instead of putting all of this pressure on the victims.
Hmm. Well, but do you feel like it is pressure, or I mean, I don't know, because I can only speak for myself, right? I can only speak for, how I would, or if I was in a situation, what I may do, or situations that I have been in, what I would do, or what I've done. But do you feel that is so? For instance, let's say okay, let's use Harvey Weinstein as an example. The man is how old? Let's say he's 80 years old, right? I don't know how old he is. He's been doing it, let's say all his life, right? So to someone that might be mentally disturbed, he thinks that that's his right, let's just say, right? So at what point do you say, hey, well, you're physically putting your hands on me. I'm physically more dominating than you. Don't I do something? Don't I put him in his place?
Not necessarily. So let's look at it this way. As a woman, right?
Mm,
Women have a long, 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 long history
mm,
of being overpowered, being silenced, being abused, used as sex symbols, sex slaves, every derogatory category that you can think of. Most of his victims were women.
mm,
And then we also perpetuate a culture that women are less than.
mm,
Women are, good for cooking, cleaning, making babies, having sex, right? That's the culture that we've kind of grown up in.
mm,
So if you have a man that is in a position of power, if you're trying to, be an actress, elevate your career, trying to get in this blockbuster movie, hopefully be the next Oscar winner, and you ain't got much in the bank account, but this is going to be your next break, and you're supposedly meeting with this man that is able to, get you in the door and offer you this opportunity, and you think, okay, it's just a business transaction, and then he turns around and assaults you.
mm.
You already started off with a disadvantage and not having a voice, and then this happens to you to even silence your voice even further. So I already didn't have a voice to begin with, or didn't have much of a voice to begin with. Now I have no voice. Now I have to go through the trauma of this happening to me, when that was not my intention, that was not what I had planned for. And then I have to go through the psychological trauma after that event. So again, people that are predators, when they're trying to overpower people and use that power to their advantage and not care about the other person and what's going to happen to them going forward, that's where we need to work with people that are predators.
Mhm.
Because it could be, maybe it was a different type of woman. It doesn't mean that she wouldn't be a victim. There, statistically, there are many women that are victims. I think right now it's 1 in 4 women have had some sort of traumatic event that has been related to a sexual assault. That doesn't mean that we have to, downplay their voices even more. We need to do something more to educate the people that are doing the assaults and being the predators.
But does it when you say 1 in 4, right?
Hmm.
Are we saying that we're saying that they're predators, right? But like the people that have some kind of something that the other person wants. So that's where they're in the power position. The person wants like a break or whatever it is. But for instance, when you use the example of going to a business meeting, right? If I tell you let's have a business meeting, let's talk about your future, meet me in my hotel, here's the key. Or I say, hey, let's have a business meeting, meet me at this cafe downstairs. And, you know, at what point do we say, well, damn, you didn't see, why would you go to somebody's apartment or hotel and not think that, hey, wait a minute, he might want something more than what he's saying. Now, I'm not taking anything away. Like we obviously know there's something wrong with that. For the dude to say, for somebody or anybody, dude, woman, to say, meet me in my hotel. We know he's wrong right off the bat. But do we now? What do we say? Well, kind of what is going through your head to say, oh, well, this is all good to meet somebody in their house or in a place that's not public for a business transaction. If it's a business transaction, why am I meeting you? You know, in your place. I should be meeting you somewhere where business transaction should happen. You know what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say where we know that he's wrong.
Yeah, that
we know
mentality is correct. Like, why would you? But again, when you think about it, some people don't think the way that you and I think.
Right.
You can't make everyone think the way that you and I think. And to be granted, sometimes business transactions do go down in hotels and penthouses and suites and things like that, depending on what industry you're in. So just because, again, that coulda, woulda, shoulda, you know, the way I think about it doesn't necessarily mean that's the way that you think about it.
Right.
Because not everyone is as educated, street smart, common sense, or whatever it may be. And again, when we keep putting that pressure, like, well, why would you go to his hotel room? Why wouldn't you go to a Starbucks or his office? Again,
I think there's education that could be given on both sides of what I'm trying to say. What I mean by that. I feel like attacking one side is not going to help everyone. I think we need to educate both people, predators and prey, because so that you don't become prey anymore. You need to educate yourself to become some kind of a predator, or at least to know when someone's after you. Does that? I don't know if that makes any sense, because we know that he's wrong, but at the same time, if you got fooled once, you can get fooled in another way. So we got to educate both sides of the spectrum. Like, listen, you shouldn't be doing that. But at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, we can't stop all predators. So you also have to be educated so that you don't get caught by a predator.
And again, you can be educated. You can put yourself in the safest situation. But again, it does not mean that you may not ever be in a situation. People can get snatched up off the street. Sometimes it can be your own family member that is the predator. It can even be intimate partner violence, where you may be in a relationship with this person and this type of stuff may be going on behind closed doors.
Right.
So again, it's not a one size fits all.
Right. I just, like I said, I think that, again, both sides should be educated. It's just the same thing with the R. Kelly thing. Like, we know this dude is crazy. We know, there's no forgiving someone that does that to young people. But now how are we gonna fix the other side of the spectrum, right? Why are these parents letting them go with him? How are we gonna educate that side? Because you could do whatever you want to R. Kelly. It's not gonna say there's not gonna be another one. So what are you gonna do for the next people that come to the next R. Kelly part 2? You gotta educate both the sides. We gotta stop him from doing what he's doing and educate, people's families and the circle that they're around, to educate that whole, because, I didn't like what I was hearing when, we let him go with him because he was giving him an opportunity to, nah, man, I'm not gonna do that. I don't care who's giving who opportunity. You should be the manager. If my daughter was gonna be the next big thing, I'm her manager, because I know that at the end of the day, I got my daughter's best interest at heart. I'm not going to send you up with some person that I never heard of, hoping that they got the best interest of my child at heart. So I think it's education on both sides of the end. When bringing that into, teaching about mental health and people coming in with mental health issues, do you have that? Is that something that is really prevalent out in the area? Like, I guess you could say people or women or men getting into these kinds of altercations, and do you feel like you have, like, is that a part of the health building teaching when you do?
So typically when we think of education, our education tends to be a little more targeted to whatever audience that we are speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
If that is something where the audience that we want to talk to would benefit from that type of conversation, then yeah, sure, we can definitely have those type of conversations.
Mm.
Because we also have to keep in mind sometimes these conversations can be very triggering for people because they may have a background with trauma or experience of trauma, witness of trauma, whatever it may be. So we do want to be sensitive when we do have these conversations. So if someone is not ready to process that trauma, they have the opportunity to back out so that they can heal in the appropriate way.
So you kind of give them like a little inch here of certain things to see how they react to whatever you're speaking on.
Oh no, I tell people like this is the content that we're going to be speaking on. If you're going to be triggered, then you are able to excuse yourself. Because I am not in the business of re-traumatizing someone.
Right. I get you. That does make sense. So is this is like when you're like publicly speaking, when you're talking to like a group of people, or is this like private session that you say, look, we're going to talk about this, but if you don't want to, if this is triggering
when
for
you
you.
come into a session, you are talking about the things that are targeted for your treatment. Let's say I have a patient, they come and they say, okay, I have a history of sexual assault.
Okay.
Is that something that you want to work on in therapy? Yes or no? If it is something that you want to work on in therapy, this is what it's going to look like. These are some things that you can expect throughout that process. You never want to force someone to talk about their trauma, whether it's in the therapeutic session, an educational seminar, online, or wherever it may be. Again, that re-traumatization is sometimes stronger than the initial traumatization.
Right, bringing it back up all.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks for her. Okay, so that's
we can never force someone to, talk about their trauma when they're not ready.
right. That's interesting. Huh. I'm learning a lot of new things about, because like I said, stuff like this is not very, prevalent out here. It's not a lot of information out there unless you specifically go to seek. And I think everybody should have at least some kind of a general knowledge on, issues like, for instance, what was that? What's that? When women have babies and they get what is it called? Sometimes they get post traumatic. Like that's kind of like a new postpartum. Yeah, depression, right? Like that's something that was relatively new to me. I'm like, man, I was like, wait a minute, you sure? Because you don't really know, especially from a man. I don't have kids, so it's something that I might never see. And when you hear, women have it, you're like, damn, and it's so widespread that it's you have to take it seriously. How I mean, have you how have you come in contact with that?
I do not treat postpartum. That is not my specialty. There are people that are specifically trained in postpartum depression for women and yeah, so that is not my background. I would refer out for that.
Okay. So, if for men get it too?
Yeah, there is a prevalence of men having some having some symptoms of a postpartum depression because it is a lifestyle change. It's a big life event that can trigger some feelings in men as well too.
Interesting. Oh, because since I train martial arts, and I've done it for my whole life, like a lot of us in the community or have done martial arts, also have like been in the military, and they come to do martial arts after they get out, and a lot of us are under the kind of stop bitching and just do it kind of mentality. Like we just do things like this. If we got to do it, we have to do it. Like, we don't really put too much thought into it. If it's you got to do 50 kicks, you got to just do it. Or if you got to clean your bed, you got to do it. We make a lot of less excuses. So every time when we hear certain things, we always kind of like put it under the column of like, look, just like stop bitching about it and just do it. But when you really look at it, like there's some things that we need to really look at, and really maybe it is a real issue. For instance, when I was taking a walk, because I walk my mom to work every day before I go and train, and she talks about how a lot of the young, for instance, that's like really, really, I guess she calls them, really pretty girls, and she's like, oh, they're gonna be really pretty when they get older, but how they talk to these, these teachers, they curse them out and stuff. She's like, I feel like there has to be some kind of like a mental health issue with that. I was like, I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know how it is because I know in a disciplinary faction that wouldn't be tolerated, especially out in like the Caribbean. They kind of like ignore people like that. Well, at what point do you stop ignoring and start fixing the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Or stop fixing because there has to be something going on for them to look at authoritative figures and not have the proper respect for that. So I don't know. I feel like that could all encompass. Can it all encompass mental health, or could it just be some mental health issues and just some people who just really don't care, disciplinary or whatever, whatever.
Again, it could be an individual issue. It doesn't
Mm,
necessarily have to be mental health. Sometimes it's discipline.
right,
Sometimes it's the way that the boundaries are set up in the home.
right,
Sometimes it's what's going on in the home.
mm,
Sometimes it's not being taught, okay, this is how you have to interact with people, at school, at work, or out in the community. It could be a number of issues. So it's really more so, how do we assess the situation and treat it the way that it needs to be treated? If it is a mental health issue, okay, we can treat it as a mental health issue and go forward. If it's more of a home issue, how can we treat the home issue? If
mm,
it is a issue between the parent and the child, how do we fix that issue and help nurture a better relationship? If it's someone that just has poor boundaries, how do we teach them about boundaries? So
right,
again, we think of mental health, but sometimes when we get so caught up, we kind of start labeling every single thing as mental health, and we over pathologize, we
right, right,
over
right,
diagnose, we over treat. And that's
right.
where we can also get caught up as well too.
So real quick, it brings me to because I want to kind of circle around on this and kind of end it off with this. So I think a big problem with especially our society, is the demasculation of the black man, right? I feel like not only that, since there, a lot of black men are not in the households anymore, right? Have you seen the Gillette commercial, the new Gillette commercial with the toxic masculinity?
Yeah, I
I don't
just
know if
saw
you.
it. Yeah.
So a lot, that's two. The two sides here is one that's saying, you gotta stop complaining, like, and not say that toxic masculinity is a thing. But then there's other people saying that all the issues that they listed in the commercial is not issues of toxic masculinity. Is not no like there's no male figures in the household to kind of curb that from happening. I'm more of the I know that there's a problem with toxic masculinity, but I do feel that that commercial did not represent strong male figures being in the household, because I feel I was raised with both of my parents, so I was able to see what a strong father figure, a strong patriarch is supposed to do in the household. That's why I feel like I got a lot of my views on it. So I feel like that maybe what maybe the commercial was misrepresenting what toxic masculinity is and what no male figure in the household is. I feel like the issues that they brought up in that was having no masculine. The reason why I say that is because a real man is not going to let his son be a bully. If he was a real father figure, he's not going to let his son bully anybody. He's going to say, look, you don't look for fights, you stop fights. You stop fights from even happening. Like when I teach martial arts, I tell people it's not for you to go out here and bust everybody up. It's for you to know the signs so that you don't get into an altercation. And if you do, if it's the last resort, you know how to get out of the situation. So where do you feel like how did you see that commercial, and how do you feel about the male role models not being in the household? Do you feel like it causes more of those situations than toxic masculinity would?
So when it comes to toxic masculinity, we kind of have this one thought that it's kind of like, boys will be boys and this is how we raise boys to be, and it's kind of spiraled out of control, and we're in the conversation now where everyone is trying to backtrack from what masculinity has always been, and
Mm-hmm.
toxic masculinity is kind of like one of those new pop culture words that's kind of come up within the past couple of years. When in actuality, it's not just men that contribute to toxic masculinity. There can be women that contribute to toxic masculinity in negative ways as well. Because as a society as whole, men, women, whomever, we've gotten to the idea that this is the role for the women, this is the role for the men. And it's like, no, not necessarily. We know that better than now. Women can instill thoughts in young boys and in their children of, okay, this is how a man is supposed to act. This is what a man should do. I mean, not everyone is going to have a father in the home. So if we keep relying on that idea that there's no men in the home, then we're just going to keep relying on the idea that we're going to have toxic masculinity and there's nothing that we can do for it.
Well, hold
No,
on.
women can help out with those ideas as well too. And while that was not represented in the Gillette commercial, I mean, if that was represented, trust me, Gillette probably would have had a whole 3 feature movie, because they would be talking, for days about the subject matter. It's at least a start for the conversation about toxic masculinity and what masculinity is really supposed to look like and how it can really benefit people instead of harming people as well.
Well, I think first we need to identify what is toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is it supposed to? Because to me, what I'm gathering from what I'm hearing is that toxic masculinity is the I guess more physically domination of a man over someone. So like a bully would be someone that would be
So it's not just physically, no, there's emotional as well too, because there's also the idea that boys don't cry, men
okay.
don't show emotion, men can't be vulnerable because they may be labeled as, words that I'm not going to put out there. We need
Mm,
to backtrack on it because at the end of the day, men are human.
mm,
Men have feelings. They may not, under toxic masculinity, deal with those feelings in the most appropriate way. And like, okay, you do have feelings, you do have thoughts. Instead of going with the guidelines of toxic masculinity and taking it out on other people or doing what a man should do, you
mm,
are able to, work in a more adaptive manner
mm,
and be able to be vulnerable, be yourself so that you can have a healthier sense of self as well.
mm. And when I say the whole part about men not being in the household, I mean man as in like I said, the biological father, but there should be men there,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a coach, whether it's a teacher, some kind of, because like they do say, a village, it does take a village to raise a child, and there has to be some kind of man that's willing to take the responsibility to say, well, look, you can't do certain things. You gotta kind of show them that discipline, because the dynamic between a man and a woman, we know is different. A woman is more has been traditionally more of a caretaker. She wants to nurture, she wants to love. That's kind of, they give birth. They have the first interactions with children. Letting them grow in their body and stuff. So there are some things that are always going to be different between the man and the woman, but the dynamic and a child seeing the dynamic between a man and a woman, especially a man and a woman that are together, I feel like is super important. And then when it's not there, I mean, I feel like kids do become at a disadvantage or
Yeah. And
disadvantage.
you're right. It is important when it's healthy.
Right.
You can have a man and a woman, or you can have a man that's in the household, but it has to be that healthy dynamic. Sometimes, and not saying that you were saying this, but sometimes we get caught up that there has to be a man or there has to be a
Right.
woman, or there has to be the relationship.
Mm,
Sometimes it's not necessarily a healthy dynamic or a
mm,
healthy relationship for that child to witness.
mm.
So in some cases, and again, some cases,
Right.
maybe it is better that that dynamic is not played out in front of the child, because that dynamic is going to set the idea for years to come about, okay, this is what the dynamic between a man and a woman is supposed to look like. This is what a man is supposed to do. This is what a woman is supposed to do.
Mm-mm.
You have to make sure, first and foremost, what they're going to be witnessing, experiencing, and involved with, who they're going to be nurtured by. It's someone that's not going to nurture them just for the moment, but someone that is going to, nurture their progression and them growing up to be, a
Right.
responsible,
A
healthy
possible
adult
person.
as well too.
Right. 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 Yeah. I don't. Like I said. I definitely feel, especially in our community, I think it's very targeted to get, black men out of the equation because, definitely if you look at the, civil rights movement, you saw the family, the black family. Black family was the one that was out there really pushing the issue for their people. And as you steadily got, when you got to the 70s and the 80s and stuff, you noticed that started to drop out. You noticed, um, our community just went really, really low. I think it's like one of the lowest points. Um, we need to bring back more examples of that, of how we, our families back then that we stuck together. You know, we stuck together for a common goal, and how we, when we stick together for a common goal, what we can achieve. Because that time I think it was the strongest period of a black family's lifespan. How strong we were together, and what that pushed. And you don't see that much, and you don't see people referring to that much when you come back, when it comes to education. When you talk about education, I think it's very important that we teach the younger generation about their history and what we can accomplish with trying to stay together. Not having this kind of mentality where we don't need each other, because obviously we do, because there's only but so much you can go by yourself. And especially as like a businesswoman, as a business person, myself, it's very hard to want to give that out to someone. Like, let's just say, for instance, to look for partners or look for help. It's hard to act, but when you do ask for help, especially if you get, I guess not denied, but they're not doing it the way you want to do it. You have to find that balance. But you know that you can't. I can't be everywhere at once. I can't think of everything all at the same time. There's something that you're gonna forget, and then be like, damn, I should have remembered this. But if you would have had that partner, you would have been able to probably go farther. I don't know how your experience has been, but you know, um, I know it's rough to not, to be doing it all on your own. It gotta. I mean, your mother, she probably, I mean, had to have been rough raising, you. I don't know how many siblings that you had, but I mean, I know you could have seen it. How's your experience been doing what you've been doing?
It's business, it's, healthcare. Of course, it's hard.
Mm,
Um, I think just over the years, I've gotten used to making decisions, business wise and personal wise, where I can, work on that time management, that stress management, and take care of me, because I'm also in the business of taking care of other people.
mm.
I can't take care of other people unless I take care of me. So
It's
I
all
have to
good.
set boundaries around that.
Mm. Yeah, that's rough. I don't know, but with that, anything else you want to say before we head out of here? Anything you want to
Um,
promote?
yeah, if you guys want to connect on Instagram, I am Jenn Mcpherson LPC. Same thing on Twitter and for Facebook, and my website is mcphersonCCS.com.
All right, cool. So thank you all for coming through. We'll definitely link up some more. We'll keep in touch. We got each other's numbers and stuff. Maybe we could do this again in a little bit. See how everything's been going with the book and stuff. You know when that's supposed to be dropping?
Late this year, around November. We don't have an exact date yet.
And then what, be writing some of it, or you just helping to promote it?
I'm going to be writing a chapter. The book is called Fiercely Speaking, so I will have one chapter in the book. It's an anthology.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. All right, well, we're looking forward to that. We'll see how everything is going in a few months. And all right, well, that's it. I
All right.
appreciate you coming
Yeah.
through. I'll text you and anything. I'll show you the video later.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right, take care. Bye.
All right. Bye.